Welcome back. Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And I really appreciate all of you who've been joining us throughout the years. It's an honor to share with you information, news, analysis about what's going on in Mexico, both in English and in Spanish. I want to do a shout out to my friends out in Ciudad Juarez. I was there this week at a conference. It was good to be back in the city. I hadn't traveled to Juarez for a while. So I want to send a big abrazo to all the women that participated at this marvelous conference that took place that was sponsored by Servitur. It was great to see you all. Um, well, we got a lot of news out there, and it has to do with politics. It has to do with the security situation in the country, and of course, all of us are just kind of sitting and almost holding our breath, just hoping that our country can get through this elections without having a major well, we're already in a crisis, but even a bigger crisis. There's a lot of things going on out there. There's a water crisis in Mexico City. There's been number of this week a number of candidates were threatened and murdered this week in different parts of the country. And then there's just this huge debate of certain aspects of this election. So let's just sit down and start focusing on some of these issues. That's why I really appreciate today's guest, Jorge Lara. He's the former Deputy Attorney General of what was known a couple of years ago as the PGR. Now it's the Fiscalía General de la República. It's great to have you on the show again, Jorge. Thank you so much for joining us. I don't know where to start. I mean, I'm watching the news literally almost hour by hour. We get information of candidates either being murdered or threatened, or candidates stepping down, or just refusing to compete. I know, there could be different reasons why this is happening, but I'm interested in trying to understand, what do you think about that? Why is this happening right now?
Hi, Ana Maria. It's glad to be with you, to speak with you again. As we all have already speak about this matter, I think that there is a mistake or erroneous system in order, design of the system in order to prevent this kind of crimes against political persons. I told you some days ago that in previous election there was this table, this meeting that allowed the political parties to convene with the government and the security institution in order to gather information to prevent these kinds of crimes. And in the system that is designed nowadays, the political parties and their representatives are not invited to these gatherings, to these meetings of political security. So we can say that this meeting, or whatever the name is, Mesa de Seguridad, I think it's called, doesn't have the intelligence, the complete information of the risk elements on who is being threatened, who is weak, where are the main points of concern in all the territory with this problem of dominion of organized crime groups. So I think one of the key points is this lack of communication between the government, the political parties, and the electoral authorities.
That's very interesting, because I spoke to a couple weeks ago to Benito Nassif, Dr. Benito Nassif, who is a former commissioner on the Federal Electoral Institute. And what, in trying to understand, who has a responsibility of protecting the candidates. And I guess it really comes down to the Federal Electoral Institute saying it's not our responsibility. It is it's the federal government's responsibility. The federal government is saying, yes, we have some information, but really our responsibility only is for certain candidates, which would be the presidential candidates. It would be the Congress. I believe it would be governors, and everybody else basically has to get security from their local state authorities. And of course, if you're a candidate from the opposition, doesn't matter what party you come from, you're not going to be too keen, or you're not going to trust the governor to give you the protection you need, or the information that you can use to protect yourself. So I'm somewhat mystified how this is going to end up, because they're murdering candidates almost every day, and we still have about 6 weeks left before the election. So up until now, they haven't murdered a gubernatorial candidate. So I guess people are not paying attention. But certainly it could happen. It wouldn't be the first time that a governor or governor candidate has been assassinated. So I guess the question is, at what point does this become an issue, Jorge, for the electoral authorities to question the validity of elections in certain parts of the country?
I think that in this matter, it is very important to say that the security in political elections is a state function. It doesn't matter if there's political competition, if there are some political parties in this race. I think that the government has the obligation to behave with a vision of statesmanship, and that's what we are not seeing nowadays. In these 5 years, all we are seeing is a gubernatorial way that only provides for their own people, for their own parties, without taking account, without making any dialogue, without negotiating, without opening a conversation, a candid conversation with political parties, with leaders of political parties of opposition. I think that is the bottom of the problem, of the issue. If there were some level of communication, of understanding, no matter if we are in a democratic race or competition or argument, we can all have some level of certainty of a good management of the risk. But if we have organized crime in all the territory whatsoever, and we have a president that doesn't like to speak with the opposition, that we have this fragmentation of all the parts, that that the enemy of a good intelligence system is the fragmentation, well, there are the results. I can hear you.
All of this is happening at a time where President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, from his daily press conferences, continues to polarize, and it's dangerous. I mean, it's just, words matter. We saw that in the United States when Donald Trump would use his his speeches and his access to media, and of course his Twitter account. He would be very offensive and very aggressive, and it would translate into very dangerous situations for individuals who happen to be mentioned by Donald Trump. In fact, with the trials going on, this particular trial going on right now against Donald Trump, I mean, the jury is afraid to participate, because they're afraid that they're going to be identified by somebody or some group of people, and that they're going to be threatened, or something's going to happen to their families. But coming back to Mexico and this and the way that these campaigns are taking place, I mean, they're very polarizing, and I don't think it's going to change. So all of this there's all this violence taking place, and then the president right now has decided that he is going to that they presented, and they're going to approve a series of legislation that are also very polarizing, that is creating a lot of nervousness in terms of providing the president powers that would weaken the ability of citizens and organizations to protect themselves from the president. So let's start with this reform that the president's trying to that it looks like it's going to be approved by the legislators, the legislative branch, that has to do with reforming the Amparo system. And the Amparo system is this very interesting legal mechanism, but it's like a habeas corpus. I guess that's how we translate it. What do you think about this reform?
Of course, just let me finish with the political reflection.
Okay.
I think that the lack of responsibility, the lack of statesmanship mindset of president only fits the argument that there is an election of a state, a fraud of a state in March. Not only the misuse of huge funds in order to go to the campaign of the official candidate, Claudia Sheinbaum, not only the vocal expressions of President López Obrador against the opposition and in favor of his candidate, but also this lack of responsibility in the matters of the security of the complete process. Well, that's my last opinion in regards of the security of the process. Now, regarding the legislation of the habeas corpus or ley de amparo in Mexico, is that paradoxically, we are talking about a reform that undermines the real capacities of this legal instrument that, has been designed in order to protect the citizen, to protect the human rights, to protect the liberties of all the people in Mexico. And one key issue in this process, in this amparo process, is the suspension, a provisional suspension, that is a provisional determination of the judge that says,
it would be like something like it's like a temporary order, right?
Yeah, it's a temporary order that sets everything as it is.
Temporary. It's a temporary restraining order.
Yes,
I think would be
order that doesn't prejudice the final results of the amparo, but that is very important because, let me tell you, in former days and last centuries, for example, some how do you say when the people was fusilado?
Or they were going to be shot, or there was going to be oh God,
yes, with the death penalty, the suspension was very important in order to stop that acts. Nowadays, of course, we are not talking with that kind of consequences, but if the authority wants to tear down my house, or if the authority wants to shut my business, the suspension is a very good instrument in order to prevent that to be done in
arbitrary
way. So this reform undermines the suspension, takes out the suspension of this process in certain cases. So it is a reform again that go against the interest of the people and only only goes or serves to the power and the state and the government and the legislature majorities right nowadays.
Yeah, we're talking to Jorge Lara, former Deputy Attorney General for the PGR, very, very good lawyer. I always enjoy talking to him. So with this reform to the Amparo law, basically it weakens citizens' ability to seek a restraining order to stop certain actions immediate actions by the government that that could have some consequences. And basically, you would have to wait until the end of the trial in order to figure out whether you were right or the government was right. But like you said, by that time, your house already has been destroyed. Now, why? Or there's been some.
Well, there are two topics in the reform.
Mhm.
That is one, and the other key issue is the Amparo in former days. They have on this principle of when that only benefits the people or the person
It's kind of an
who
individual impact, right, of the Amparo. And even though the
who makes
decision, yeah,
the trial. And
uh-huh,
nowadays, the evolution of Amparo, the evolution of human rights in our country, has made an effect that the judges can apply the benefits of the suspension to a
mhm,
broader group of people, not only the plaintiff. So this is the second topic that is being
mhm.
undermined by this reform. That again, this suspension will benefit only the plaintiff and not
The plaintiff, yeah.
the
So let me just think of an example. The government's planning to build a dam that could affect, it could affect, thousands of people if they build this dam. Um, I'm just thinking of examples. So I, as a plaintiff, go and request an amparo to stop the building of the dam until it's decided whether it was legal or not. But that amparo will only benefit me. It won't benefit the other 100 people who could be affected by the building of the dam. Is that kind of how
Yes,
this is?
it's applied with a technicality regarding the what is called uh, general effects law.
Mhm.
When
Right,
there's a general effect law or determination is when this happened. For example, the energy, the electrical industry in law.
right.
One company made the claim,
Hmm.
but the effects of the suspension was recognized to the broader number of
To all
companies.
the other companies,
Yes.
right. So the only person or the only company that is benefited under this law would be the company that is placing the claim. All the other companies would have to place their own claim or
Yes.
their own amparo in order to benefit from it. So why is it so urgent for the president to get this law passed right now? I mean, is he doing this for Claudia Sheinbaum? I guess he's assuming that she's going to be the president. Or, I mean, why is there such urgency right now to get that law passed?
I think this is a chapter of his struggle with the judicial power, because
Hmm.
this is one of the key instruments that the judges and the magistrates have used in order to stop his laws, his decrees, and his
Hmm.
public projects. So I
Hmm.
think this is in the broader scope. This is one like chess is one move
Hmm.
in order to undermine the capacities and the faculties of the judicial branch as
Hmm.
in its whole. So
Let
I
me
think
ask you,
the reason.
well, let me ask you the other law that was discussed this week that is making, I have to say, including myself, many of us very, very nervous, which would give the president an increased authorities to provide indultos, or so, I guess it would be an amnesty, although it's not exactly an amnesty. Can you talk to us about this legislation and what's your opinion? Why is that happening also right now?
Well, I think all these reforms goes only fit the impression that we are again in some kind of anti-democratic regression regarding
Mm-hmm.
the capacities of the president. You know, in Mexico, we have been struggling throughout the decades against the presidentialism and the huge faculties of the president by itself. And again, we are witnessing this strengthening. This piece of law gives the president the power to forgive some criminal of any crime, any misdemeanor, anything that you can imagine without
Mm-hmm.
any constraint, without any
Without
process,
any explanation.
without
Can
any
it be?
explanation, and
Yeah.
without any consideration. This is very important. Maybe this is the most important thing, without any consideration towards the victims of the crimes. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why many human rights leaders in Mexico are criticizing this piece of law, because
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there will be no advocacy for the victims or for the communities that are
Mm-hmm.
affected by these huge crimes against the communities, or against certain person in particular. The president will be free to appoint who is going to be free without giving any explanation whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
We know that in the process, in the criminal process, there are some kinds of negotiations, or there are plea bargain, and there
Mm-hmm.
are some other alternative means in order to to negotiate the punishment. But this doesn't have anything to do. This
Mm-hmm.
can't compare. This huge faculty can't compare. It would be maybe more powerful than the Supreme Court, precisely in a judicial matter.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, just let's think of an example, because when I read the law, I'm trying to understand if it's just an overall power in which he can pardon someone who has been convicted, or is it someone who's they've opened up an investigation? At
In
what
all cases,
stage can they pardon
in
that
all
person? And does that person have to provide something, information, or I don't know, I don't what I mean, what is, I mean, how would this work?
well, it's very easy. The vocabulary says that any person who has some information that uh, uh, allows to clarify any case of interest of the state, that's all,
Mhm.
will should have the benefit of the amnesty by the president itself.
Mhm.
That's all.
That's all.
It doesn't provide like any other laws or any other statutes that compromises the to be witness in certain process, to give
Mhm.
information, to testify in a court of law. No, there are no boundaries, there are no conditions, only
Mhm.
to give information that could clarify some case of the interest of the state. What can we qualify as interest of the state? We don't know, because the law doesn't say so.
Mhm.
It doesn't
And
say
it could be any type of information, right? It could
any
be the
any type
phone
of
number.
information, but is not binding in order to, well, first you have to go and testify
Mhm.
for of law. No, nothing.
No.
On
Yeah.
to give the information. And who is going to be the recipient of the information? Only the president. And what is the president going to do with that information? We don't know.
That is it's very confusing. It's very worrisome, because you could imagine a situation where there is, there's a potential witness against, I don't know, the president's sons, because who may have been involved with some kind of criminal activity, right, or corruption. He could actually pardon someone who has the information that could prosecute, that would lead to the prosecution of his kids, right?
Right.
Or any Morena politician.
Yes, or any, for example, if he gave some orders to any of his collaborators that maybe, well, let's put an example that's in the as a rumor. Some say that maybe um, this initiative has a dedicatory towards Lopez Gatell because he will be very trouble. He will be facing very much nuisances and trouble because of the COVID misattention,
Mishandling of the COVID
mishandling
crisis.
of the
That's
COVID.
very interesting. So
Yes.
Hugo Lopez Gatell, the former Deputy Secretary of Health, the person who was in charge of the COVID-19 strategy, and a strategy that has been highly criticized because of the number of people that eventually died in Mexico because due to COVID-19 and a
But
bad
not only
and a bad.
criticized Ana Maria, has already been facing some charges. Well, there are some cases
Oh,
nowadays
really?
in the Attorney General's offices nowadays.
So there's already criminal cases against him. That would be interesting. So in this scenario, basically with this law, the president could say, Hugo, give me some information. We don't know what. And in exchange, I'm going to pardon you against any criminal prosecution that comes your way. Is that kind of
Is
where this is?
that the scenario? Yes. Yes.
Wow. So it's basic. That's fascinating. I mean, he could actually do the same thing with any of the heads of
Yeah.
the drug cartels or the Segalmex, whomever is going to be eventually convicted on Segalmex. I mean, it's just this very broad authority that would give him a lot of power and an ability to negotiate with even political groups. So he
Yes,
could do this with the former president.
because you said that in the United States, this is one attribution of the president when he finishes the term.
Yeah.
Here, there's no limit, no
Yeah,
such.
well, it doesn't necessarily have to be done at the limit of their term, but usually the presidents do it at the
It's a
limit,
tradition.
as
It's
they're
like
leaving, because it's very politically explosive. I mean, people don't like these types of pardons because they're usually pardoning, not always, but they're usually pardoning people that shouldn't be pardoned,
yes.
There was a couple cases that Trump actually pardoned people that probably should have been pardoned. They may have been justly been in jail too long. And of course, he made it public
This
and he got a
also
lot of recognition for that, but that's very
this,
rare.
this also has to do with decorum. You
Right.
can recognize if the president is forgiving someone who is a
Mhm.
leader, who is a political imprisoned people. Well, we all can understand if
Right.
there's a woman.
I'm not even too sure the law makes, now that I think about it, if this law that is being discussed by the Mexican Congress, it has a caveat where you have to make these pardons or these immunities made public.
No, there is no such provision as I remember because it's a very short amendment.
Very short, yeah. So the other scenario would be that the president's assuming that Claudia Sheinbaum is going to be the next president, and she could pardon Andrés Manuel López Obrador for everything.
Of course, that's another scenario that can be
So
happening.
that is which is a fascinating option. Are they going to be approved? Are they going to pass these two?
Sure.
Yeah.
The Senate has already passed both of them, and there's going to be the discussion in next week in the Cámara de Diputados, and we know that the majority is already, the numbers are already favoring these two amendments.
So we're running out of time. I wanted to ask you about the other legislation that is very controversial that is being debated right now that has to do with pensions. And without going into too much detail right now, I think we have to, there's still a lot of confusion in terms of what is the implication of the law that's being debated right now, and it makes it difficult to talk about it, is because even as it was being debated, there was some changes made to the initial draft that was approved, and once they, the draft that was approved and they brought it back, mysteriously some changes were made that were not approved. So it's hard to talk about it right now until we know exactly what the language says. But do you have any reaction to that legislation? It seems to be very unpopular, but it's unpopular because people just don't trust the government with their pensions.
Yes, and because what is in the middle, what is in the center of this amendment is the possibility that the government takes out money from your account without any
Limits.
process, without any limits, and maybe they're gonna make some deposits to people who needs it or something else, but the key issue here, well, there are several issues, very critical, all of them, but as a lawyer, I can tell you that maybe the most important thing and that's why this is called a confiscation, is that they are taking the money, that they are disappropriating the people without a due process, as it is mandated in the Constitution. You don't know, your family doesn't have the capacity to know that they are being disappropriating of what is
Your patient funds,
your property or the property of your state. And this is very arbitrary reform that, of course, the majority can pass, but of course this has some very important issues regarding constitutionality that make us foresee that, of course, there's going to be a litigation again in the Supreme Court, and we can foresee that the Supreme Court will qualify this as unconstitutional again. In this eternal fight that seems to have no ending between the president.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. Jorge, I really appreciate you joining us here once again on Living in Mexico. Thank you so much. Promise me you'll come back soon.
Thank you, Ana Maria. Always
thank you. Thank you. That was Jorge Lara. He's a great lawyer. I always enjoy talking to him. He's a former Deputy Attorney General at the PGR many years ago. We're going to go to commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar, and you're listening and watching Living in Mexico. Don't go away. I'll be right back.